Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Steve Ward. On the Factor, we delve into all aspects of the unknown, and by listening to and examining the experiences of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary events, we attempt to set aside preconceived ideas and try to understand what is actually happening, and hopefully find connections or other hidden patterns that will lead us to a better understanding of just what is going on. And first, I want to introduce my co-host tonight, Marnie Kirby. Marnie, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor. Welcome back, in fact.
Thank you. I'm really excited. It's been a while.
Well, what I want to do is tell people first that you were a guest on about my fourth or fifth show, way back in the beginning, toward the beginning. And that was April of 2019. And so it's been over a year, well over a year. And it was a really great show, and I've actually, this show will be up on Tuesday, and this is Sunday that we're taping it. So what I've done is on my Facebook page, I have put up the link to that interview we did. And I had told you in person, but I got a lot of good feedback from people about that show and about your interview. As you know, when you get just one positive response, that equals what, 100 or I don't know what the formula is, but several people wrote me and told me how impressed they were with you and the way you presented yourself, because we talked about some pretty strange experiences, sort of Men in Black related kinds of things, other paranormal experiences, and people thought you acquitted yourself very well.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with me. And you did all along, and I really, really appreciated it, because it's, Amberrose, who's here tonight, she and I were having this conversation earlier today about, and we have several times, about how challenging it can be to somebody who, there's people out there who have or believe they have one type of experience, and they discuss that. And then there's, in my case, there's been multiple types of experiences. And sometimes in my history, they don't all seem to relate. And trying to make sense out of that from the time you're a little person until, as an adult is very challenging. And then sharing that with people when you don't want to be perceived as, it's fine to be a weirdo amongst our weirdo friends. But, in the world in general, it's very challenging. So it was a very welcoming conversation. It was very encouraging to me to have positive feedback and not be considered such, a weirdo, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. It was all positive. And these days, more and more, what we're dealing with here, like I said in the opening, ordinary people, regular people that have experienced extraordinary events and trying to process them. Another lady I talked to around the same time as I talked to you, Missy Lamontagne, had a missing time experience, and then later on retrieved some possible memories through hypnosis. But it was the same kind of thing, a very normal lady trying to deal with the unknown. And her thing was wrestling with trying to find out what happened as best she could, wondering should she come forward, and then deciding to come forward like you did, because both of you realized that there are other people that have these kinds of bizarre experiences, and some of them are very alone. They don't know much about the paranormal beyond what they see on, so-called reality TV. So when people that have experiences like yours come forward, it's very helpful to other people that have also had experiences that they can't quite process in normal life.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't believe it's been over a year already, and because that seemed so recent, and I've thought about her often and still have not made connection with her. So that's a great reminder for me to do that, because I think that there's something that she and I would share.
Well,
So
I'd like to have her back on sometime, and I'm just shooting from the hip here, but maybe you could come on again as a co-host, and we could talk to Missy together. I mean, she's a great lady, and that would be a
that,
great show.
yeah, I would love that.
Okay, well, let's get to our guest, and I think you might have stumbled across this lady before. Uh, Amberrose Hammond has researched legends, ghost stories, haunted places, and true crime, and other macabre topics about Michigan since 2000. Interested in the strange and unusual since before time existed, her pursuits into the paranormal led her to create Michigan's Other Side. That's Michigan's Other Side, a website exploring the mysterious past and present of the Great Lakes State. Amber Rose has lectured extensively on her research, conducts wicked cemetery tours in West Michigan, and all around loves to tell stories to anyone who will listen. She's the author of Ghosts and Legends of Michigan's West Coast, Wicked Ottawa County, and Wicked Grand Rapids, and a pile of research she doesn't know with what to do yet. Amber Rose is also a co-host, which we're going to talk about, on the groundbreaking podcast Ghostly Talk, which began just as the Dark Ages were starting to wind down, and I think that was in 2002, but Amber will correct me if I'm wrong. Amber, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Thank you, Steve. It's wonderful to be on your show.
Well,
I'm so excited right
I,
now.
I was thrilled. I've been on your show twice, and I've been in studio twice.
Yes, you have in person even.
I know.
And Steve, you don't live close by. It's like a 2-hour trek for you to get over here.
Well, 2 hours in, when you think about the conferences that we go to all over the place, 2 hours is nothing. You just strap your arms to the steering wheel, get some sleep, and as long
Get
as
some
you're on a straightaway, you're
snacks.
good.
You're good.
Well, as I recall, a gentleman that you lived with there named Scott L.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the original Ghostly Talk guys.
Yes.
He used to have to make the trek all the way across the state to see you back in the
Yeah.
old days?
Yeah. The reason I met my boo is because I used to listen to a little podcast, which before back in the 2002 era, in 2003, they were not called podcasts. It was just an internet-based talk show. And I was getting involved in ghost hunting in early 2000. And then the group I was with said, "Oh, we listen to Ghostly Talk. It's this really cool talk show." Okay, well, I'll check this out. Who are these cats? And then I started listening to Doug and Scott, and they would do this weekly podcast. And for me, it was way more accessible than shows like Coast to Coast that came on at 1 a.m.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'd have to tune back in the day because this is before you could easily access stuff through digital means, like pay a subscription and then go through their archives. I would have to be up at 1 a.m. and then I would have to tune my Nickelodeon alarm clock to that station that would somehow vaguely get in that Coast to Coast, and maybe even, how with old radios, you'd sometimes have to like hold your hand there as to be like the
Yeah.
human antenna, and then hold my hand there to try to get into whatever they were talking about, whether it was UFOs, ghosts, conspiracy, whatever it was. And so I would listen to that, but then this whole thing, this internet talk radio, what is this? I am way more interested in this. These guys come on every Sunday. What? And they were fun. They were great to listen to. They'd have these guests on that you'd never heard of. They weren't big names. They were just interesting people telling interesting stories. And so then, of course, our little ghost group at the time decided to have a paranormal picnic. And so that was like, yeah, Marnie was there. And that was 2005.
Oh, wow.
And so we invited a couple local ghost groups out to our paranormal picnic, which the idea of this picnic was to have like an outdoor thing with like lectures and hot dogs and just, I know it's so weird to think back on the day. And then we invited Ghostly Talk out. We're like, let's give these guys a really cool award. And at the time, there was this guy making these things. I'm going to blank right now on his website because he still exists, but it was like Haunted Memories doc. I can't remember, so I'm not even going to say it. But he made these changing portraits. He was really good at it. So there was this picture of the Mona Lisa, and as you turned, she would turn into a zombie. And so we got like an extra big picture of this, and then we mounted it on this beautiful, we got it so beautifully framed. And then it had a little plaque on it that said, "The Ghostly Talk, thank you for your dedication to helping improve the paranormal world." So we presented this to Doug and Scott, who had showed up and drove about 2.5 hours, depending on how fast you're speeding, from Detroit to come to West Michigan, and said, "Here you go." And then Scott and I were like similar in age. I don't know. There's a 5-year difference. Doesn't matter now. And we are big metalheads. We like metal music. So somehow in the evening, me and Scott got to talking about, what album did you just buy? And he's like, I just bought the new, Fate's Warning album, special edition box set. And I'm like, no way, I bought that. And boom. We just started talking back, and it was Yahoo Chat back in the day. I'm dating myself. And then
You're dating yourself.
Yep.
That's funny. We didn't have internet in my day.
I know. And so then we just started chatting, and then 15 years later, because just this past August 20th has been 20 years, but Ghostly Talk was an important thing in our life. And then we Scott and Doug, the original co-hosts of the show, they did it till 2009. And then we were super burned out. We were traveling to conferences everywhere across different states. We were going to Kentucky, Massachusetts, Chicago, and we were doing all this stuff. I mean, free. This was all on our own dime. We'd go and
you guys provided a service because people like me that couldn't get to all these different conferences, you would record the talks, put them on the Ghostly Talk website so people could be there, and it was just. And it was doing a service for those particular conferences to draw more people in, and doing a service to people just listening to the show.
Yep. And we got, of course, we got permission from all the speakers that we could post their stuff. And it's still out there to this day. You can go to our website at ghostlytalk.com, and you can go to the archives, and you can go from 2002 to 2009 and download the MP3 files. I think some of them, there is a guy that's rebroadcasting us, so you can find him on YouTube too. He's slowly rebroadcasting everything, but there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of early discussions with people who are still prominent in the field, like John Zaffis, Rosemary Ellen Guiley. Even if you are a Ghost Adventures fan, Zach Baggins, before he was ever on Ghost Adventures, is on Ghostly Talk, talking about whatever he was.
Before he was wearing tight pants on TV, he was on Ghostly Talk.
Yes, he was on our show one time, and so it's just fun. And then of course we came back around 2016. And thought, okay, now we're in a whole different jungle. We're in this podcast jungle. Like, what is this? Like, we're free to do whatever we want. We can say whatever we want. We're not being rebroadcast on radios or anything, so we can drop an occasional F-bomb or whatever we want. So the first year back, I think it was pretty much us drinking and talking, which is fun. You can get a lot of good discussion over drinks. And then we decided, you know what, we kind of miss talking to people again. We sort of want to bring back the interview style that was part of the original show. And so we started doing that, and slowly with that interview process crept back in. And now we've been back at it, and it's 2020. We've been 4 years back into it. I think we're only on show 132 or 133, but there's 100 and some shows that you can go back and listen to. And if you go back into the archives, don't judge us for drinking while podcasting.
Well, and I also highly recommend to go back in the old ones, because I didn't realize that you discovered Ghostly Talk about the same time I did. It was late 2006 after a Mothman festival. And I had, I think they were set up there doing interviews, but I didn't really didn't know who they were. And the podcasting was, they were, I wasn't kidding when I said they were pioneers, because nobody or very few people knew how to do this. Now everybody and their weird, strange uncle has a podcast. They're just everywhere. So it's hard to stand out, but people do it for fun anyway. And but I admit I was so envious of you guys, because now I grew up in a suburb just north of Detroit called Ferndale. You guys are just a few suburbs to the east of me.
We're 7 miles away from Ferndale right now.
So it's like the kids down the street making good, talking to all these great people. And you had people from the Ghost Hunters. They went back when they were a big name. And again, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, like you said, John Zappis. You had big names, but you also had people that were local, that were doing good work. But was a great for them to have a forum to come on and talk to people. And it was a 3 hour a night, 3 hours Sunday
It
nights, right?
was live. It was live on Sundays, and I think that's the blessing about like the podcast culture now, is that we don't do it live anymore. I mean, I kind of miss having a chat room feature where people could kind of chime in and ask questions during the talk, but it's a lot more low pressure, just recording. If someone has to suddenly cough violently or get up and use a bathroom or something unexpected happens, that's the beauty of editing nowadays. We can edit it. So there's kind of a relaxation in that. But I do miss some aspects of live. But, you know.
Well, it was. I mean, I used to love the opening, the first half hour, sometimes hour, but you would fill up 3 hours with at least three different guests. And I remember asking Scott and Doug at a Mothman festival one time, and of course those festivals occur in September. I said, "Well, how far are you guys booked in advance?" And they were booked well into the next year.
Yeah.
Like three guests a show, and that's pretty phenomenal. But I used to love to hear you guys would come back from a conference or whatever, and so we'd hear about the good stuff and the bad stuff, and once in a while we'd hear stories about either Scott experiencing road rage or somebody else experiencing road rage that he witnessed going across the state to see you. It was just you guys were just having such a good time, and that just translated to everybody. I wonder, Marty, when did you discover Ghostly Talk at the same time when they were broadcasting back then?
Not really.
You didn't have the internet. Okay.
Oh, yeah, right. I don't know. I was stuck in the Stone Age. I was quite a bit older than Amberrose. But what's funny about that time is I was at that paranormal picnic.
Yep.
And Amberrose and I we weren't friends at that time. We had a mutual friend.
We were just acquaintances.
We were acquaintances. Amberrose, the reason I was at that paranormal picnic, I think it's funny to say,
I know.
is Amberrose was part of a paranormal group, and at that time I happened to have run into, in the area of where we live in West Michigan, I hadn't been there all that long when I ran into a metaphysical shop in the area, which I found amusing in our area, and it wasn't well received there. But I would go and hang out there. I became friends with the owners, and Amberrose and the paranormal team had done some.
Yeah, we came to investigate your house.
You did, and so from there, that's how I met them, because I said, "Well, I have some really weird things going on," and I dared to venture into that area, and I invited the team over twice. You guys were there and investigated our house. My kids were experiencing weird stuff. I was, and then my ex-husband he was not digging this at all at that time, but he was experiencing some stuff as well. So they came out, and we had a mutual friend, our buddy Tom, best buds for both of us.
Right.
And Tom is well known amongst all these people doing the paranormal.
Yeah.
So he's now deceased, but that's how I met Amberrose. And then Tom had invited me to the paranormal picnic, and I remember Scott there.
Yeah.
And I don't know why he stuck out to me so much, because I didn't know.
Loud.
Well, no, I didn't know anything about. That's true, but
that
that's
loud,
not,
hairy guy.
that isn't how we perceived him then. But so no, I remember just I remember the Mona Lisa. There was weird things that stuck out that day, but so anyway, it was fun to just be part of a group of something when my life was so,
it's a group
different.
of weirdos. Weirdos getting together, talking about weirdo stuff.
Well, I was super excited to find a tribe, but I got to be honest, I never had listened to Ghostly Talk until Amberrose and I became friends. I don't know how long it's been now. Quite a long time. And it became a routine for us to hang out once a week until she moved to Troy, and at that time, then when you fired up Ghostly Talk again is when I started listening.
Yeah.
And I don't listen on a regular basis because I have like podcasts.
There's so many.
To.
There's a ocean of podcasts out there, which I often tell people, like, go. I know a lot of our listeners to Ghostly Talk. They listen to multiple podcasts. And we recently had a guest on. We'll be posting the show on actually Wednesday. And he came on. He's just a listener. He had an experience, and he wanted to, we invited him on to talk about his experience living in kind of a haunted house and the things he's dealt with different entities and experiences and energies and things. And I know Marnie and I were having this conversation earlier today. You don't have to be an author or a filmmaker or someone out there publishing something or anything to come on a show and share your experience and give something to the public with that experience, because everyone out there has weird things happen, and it's so nice to hear someone share their experience and go, oh, they had that happen. I'm not alone. I'm not a weirdo either. Like this is not some kind of isolated event that's only happened to me. And it's nice to have that kind of thing happen and be able to have these people on the show. And so I don't know. That's, yeah.
Well, that's a big thing, because I've brought that up to you numerous times. Steve, I was telling Amber on more than one occasion in private messaging, we'll send each other messages when we read certain things, and I for a while there became a little frustrated, because not that I need to be, radio shows or anything like that, but I was worried about the other people like me who are out there with these experiences. And you go to these cons and everybody has an experience of some sort, and you hear it so much that you can become immune to it. But we put these other people who have books or public speakers or whatever on these pedestals, and their stories are suddenly credible. And sometimes those stories still have a different spin that somebody else might not know. But what's forgotten about is some of these researchers, a lot of these researchers, are actually getting their stories from people that they've interviewed. So these aren't their personal experiences. They come from those same people like myself or other people who have a ton of odd experiences, who don't get to talk to very many people. And that becomes really important. So today, I was telling Amber, I said, thank you for saying that. Thank you for having somebody on your show that is just your everyday person like myself, who hasn't written a book, who isn't going in, they're not the public speaker at these paranormal conventions. We've got to remember that these experiences that people are writing about are the everyday person.
Yeah, they happen all the time, every day.
And you got to allow an outlet for those people to trust somebody and not criticize them for it.
Yeah,
or
just let them talk.
That's why they're not
Don't
sharing
judge
their
them.
story. Yeah.
Just let them share.
Well, see, that was the ghostly talk model from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you had the big names, and you had people that weren't that well known. And I as I've told Amber and Scott and you, Marty, a million times, that was listening to that old show planted the seed years ago, thinking about how what I would do for a podcast and how I wanted to do one, but I had no clue how to do it back then. But I was going to follow the ghostly talk model, and so consequently, I've had people on Charles Cox, for example. He's a regular attendee at Michigan MUFON, a great guy, and I knew he'd make a great guest. But I don't think he's that well known beyond a certain area in Michigan. But he's done good research for years. On the other hand, I got Reverend Michael J.S. Carter, who's a face on Ancient Aliens, and Alan Godfrey, was a classic contactee in Todmorden, England, back in 1980. So it's great to have that wide scope of people. But I have to tell you, you know who Joe and Jennifer Shortridge are, that do the 222 Paranormal podcast,
Yep.
Right? They're the ones that ran that great Toledo event last year. Well, the first time I met them was a few years ago at the Michigan Paracon, and so I thought, oh, they've got their radio thing set up. Maybe I can get an interview. Now, back then I had nothing going on. I didn't even have a chapter in a book called Weird Winged Wonders. I got a few irons in the fire now, but I had nothing. So we got to talking, and they asked the question, well, have you written a book or anything? I thought, no. But I thought, maybe I can just be so fascinating for a few minutes here that maybe they'll grant an interview. And so apparently I was, and they said, well, would you like to do a 15-minute interview? But apparently I was so fascinating that it went to about 25 minutes. So, but since then, I've been on their show several times. They're great people, and they ran that successful it was Bigfoot and Paranormal, the Toledo Bigfoot and Paranormal Conference, which they didn't come off this year, but hopefully next year. But yeah, so that's anyway. That's the ghostly talk model, and it's and not everybody that has important things to share has written a book or has written a paper or an article or whatever.
And the only reason I've written books is because a publisher reached out to me back in 2000. Oh my God, when was my first? 2009? Oh, sounds so long ago. In 2009, a publisher reached out to me and said, "Hey, we are starting this series, Haunted America. Do you have any stories to share about Michigan? We want to work with local historians, local history enthusiasts, and so we're just wondering if you have anyone you can suggest." And I was like, me? Like I'm kind of like, in the air, like even though it's email, I'm raising my hand, and I'm like, I'm sitting here on my English degree, and I don't want to teach, and so this could be productive for me. Like this could be something cool. And so I wrote him back and said, well, I've been really interested in kind of the history and hauntings of my state. Can I put in a proposal? And they're like, yes. So that was one of the things when I started ghost hunting back in the early 2000s, I got really disillusioned quite fast because when we got involved, it was like, hey, look for orbs. You're going to see these orbs show up in your photos. Those are ghosts. You're going to see this, look for light. I mean, all these bizarre things that they would, that I guess, I don't even know if I want to call them mentors, but like the people that I started ghost hunting under would tell you to look for. And after a while, I'm like, I don't think this is right. Like, I think this is actually my really crappy digital camera, like doing bad things. Like it's new technology. I think something's going on here. And sure enough, there was a lot of other researchers out there that started realizing that this early technology was inserting things into the photos, like these artifacts, because it couldn't interpret the data correctly. So it would just put in a light source of some bizarreness. And so I kind of started doubting always what I was seeing. We were doing personal investigations. We were doing I should say private investigations in homes and businesses. And I to this day, when I do lectures, I tell everyone when I start out, there is more to fear from the living than the dead, people. Because I walked into some situations in homes where I was like, I am not comfortable here. There is something else going on here that has nothing to do with ghosts. There is something creepy going on with like a mental illness issue. There is something beyond what we can do as a group of ghost hunters into this home. And so I kind of came away from that with a sour taste in my mouth. Like, I don't know if going into someone's home and trying to pinpoint their ghosts, because who's to say what's a ghost and what's not? We can't say that. There's no experts in this field. I can't walk into someone's home like so many people like to do these days and go, you have a demon. You need to use this prayer. You need to use this charm. You need to do this. I can't say that. I can't scientifically prove that. And plus, that's your home. That's your sanctuary. I don't want to go in and tell you that your home is haunted by something demonic when I don't even know what that is. And so you're making people uncomfortable in their very own home. And you don't even know, you can't even say with 100% certainty what is actually going on, just based on your own beliefs and opinions. So I kind of stepped away from that and I said, okay, well, what do I like from all this? Because since the day I was born, I've been interested in strange and unusual, but I came away loving the history behind a haunting and why something became haunted, why the story continued, how it through the decades even changed. There's a lot of urban legend in Michigan and in all over the United States and the world that has changed throughout the decades with each person that tells it orally and shares it through a midnight camp story or a slumber party or however, now on the internet and forums and on comment fields and everywhere, this story just mutates. And so I became more transfixed with that side of things. So that's when I said to the publisher, like, I want to research the history behind why places are haunted. And so that's where my first book came into play, the Ghosts and Legends of Michigan's West Coast, because that's where I was born, that's where I'm from. So that's what I was comfortable writing. And then my subsequent books actually are true crime. I've only written one paranormal themed book, even though my website is predominantly paranormal. I would go through endless newspaper. I became like an old newspaper junkie, because it's so easy now to go and subscribe to things like newspapers.com, ancestry.com, genealogybank.com, and to go combing through all of these old newspapers that have been digitized, which is amazing, because back in the day, sitting in a dark room going through microfiche was nauseating. Anyone that sat through a microfiche machine and watched those papers blur past you, it's a dizzying effect.
I have to tell you that eons ago, when I used to work for White Westinghouse, which was the appliance division, and people would come in looking for a part for their refrigerator or ancient oven, we would bring out the microfilm the microfiche and look at the diagrams and find
Yeah.
the obsolete part number of the part that they couldn't buy anymore because it had been superseded so many times. But yes, so
Yeah.
I know what that is.
Yeah, it's traumatizing. And so I would sit there and just start looking up all this obscure stuff that just I would type in keywords and weird things and then I kind of just came across in my research for looking for, haunted stuff and paranormal related stuff and occult, supernatural. I came across all these obscure, lost and forgotten true crime stories. And I mean, I'm not even a big true crime fan myself, but these stories were from my area. They were forgotten. And I'm like, I got to preserve these somehow. So my publisher had a series called Wicked, and I just pitched that to him. Like, look, Ottawa County in Little Grand Haven on West Michigan, we are a sleepy little tourist county. Everyone comes here from Chicago and other areas to come tour in the summer and relax. And, ooh, there's some dark, creepy stuff.
There's some dirt.
Well,
And it does have,
we may also may have to do another show focusing a little more on the true crime. One of my regular co-hosts, Brandy, she's very
Yeah.
much into the true crime. She's another lady that I met at the Van Meter Festival, which maybe we'll talk about
Yeah.
a little bit later. But so yeah, I didn't realize that. See, I have the other book you mentioned, the Ghosts and Legends
Yeah.
of Michigan's West Coast.
Yep.
And I do have some questions about that, but and we can talk about the true crime tonight. It's just that there's probably going to be a lot more we can focus on. But
100%.
a couple things I wanted to mention is that I think it's great that when they said, "Hey, do you know anybody that might fit this profile and could write for us?" You weren't timid and you said, "Hey, I could do it." And,
Yeah.
a lot of people might have said, "Well, gee, I don't know. I might know somebody. I'll get back to you."
Yeah, and that was a little out of character for me because I was that kid in high school and college that when you had to do like an oral report
Yeah.
and they're like, "Who wants to go first?" And I'm like, "Not me." And I'm sitting there like the very last person that goes. And then because of writing books, I started to have to do basically public speaking, which the first time I did it, it was terrifying. I was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm just going to pass out in the corner. Just leave me there. Just poke me with a stick. Make sure I'm breathing and just leave me there. And I got used to it because when you're talking about something that you know and you love and you've researched and it's like your child, you're comfortable talking about it. If someone asked me to do a lecture on mathematics, I'd be like, I'd be a ghost, just deer in headlights. It wouldn't work. So I became really comfortable with public speaking in that aspect on the ghost angle of things. But yeah, the true crime thing, totally different show. But I guess what I learned out of that is from ghost hunting and researching, getting into the history of why something's haunted, I learned that there's so much local history that was buried and forgotten. And I think that's what I've noticed. I think probably from the early O's when ghost hunting kind of became a popular fad with the advent of like Ghost Hunters, the show on Sci-Fi and a lot of other subsequent shows. I noticed a lot of like there was a billion little ghost hunting groups popping up everywhere, all over the U.S. and I'm sure over the world, like in the UK and other places. And what these people did though was they started collecting different parts of their local history that was forgotten. They started collecting folklore again. They started interviewing people like, did you remember this ghost story? And what decade did you remember it from? Was it from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? How did you remember it? And it was a new way of collecting that kind of information and then starting to put it out there either on websites, forums, putting it in books and publishing it. And it was a great resurgence of collecting and preserving that local history that often gets neglected and forgotten because it's that evil stepchild of history, that paranormal, supernatural, that stays on the outskirts. And so I think that's one of the gems that's happened in the past 20 years with paranormal research is that amount of local history that has been dug up and preserved. And I just love that.
And some people don't do that at all. I notice I don't know him well at all, but I went to one of his events that I think you guys went to. Haunted. No, it was, what was it? Weird. Oh, heck, it was Troy Taylor.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
February
Yeah, it's weird.
2007.
His Weird Winters.
Weird Winter, yes, okay. But Troy is very, very much into doing the research,
Yep.
into not just somebody touched me or we've got a great EVP. He goes
Yep.
into all that background. And now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking about I spent most of my summers as a kid up on Bois Blanc Island. I don't know if you guys know where that is in the
Yeah.
Straits of
Yep.
Mackinac. For people
Yep.
that don't know, and look at the lower, the thumb, the mitten, the lower peninsula, and then in the Straits, you've got the Mackinac Bridge, Mackinac Island, a small island called Round Island, and then Bois Blanc, which is a fairly good sized island. Well, my grandmother owned property up there. But there were stories. There was a murder on Bois Blanc Island years ago. A guy named Ratton. Well, I mean, what a perfect name for a murderer,
Right.
right? And he's supposed to have. He was living with a guy named Todd, and the cabin burned down, and everybody believed Ratton had done it. Well, Ratton actually spent some time with my great aunt and uncle who lived up there year round, and so we have these again these great true crime stories, and it goes back in history. And then one other brief thing, Dillinger is supposed to have hidden out up there. And there's a place, if you go up the old Fire Tower Road on Bois Blanc Island, there's still some foundations of some old cabins that supposedly Dillinger, under another name, was renting out to people for the summer. So, so supposedly the famous John Dillinger
Yeah.
was hiding out. I don't know if it was after his plastic surgery or whatever on Bois Blanc Island. So that's true. I didn't even think about all that a little bit of history that I know.
Yeah.
Let me just do my little intermission here. You have been listening to The High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward. My co-host today is Marnie Kirby, and we are talking to Amberrose Hammond about ghosts and all kinds of good stuff. Let's get back to what we were talking about, but I want to do a little segue because I know that you were pretty much into ghost hunting, and that was your field. And as in so many of us, I remember back in the old days, I was a UFO guy. I couldn't care less about when I was reading the great anthologies of Frank Edwards and about the Flatwoods Monster, and even a little bit about Bigfoot and the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins. When he would write chapters about moving coffins, I was out of there. I didn't want to hear anything about moving coffins. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I didn't want to read about coffins moving around either. But you, Amber Rose, had a UFO sighting at one point.
Right. So that's a really good. Okay, yeah, this is a good yeah, moving into the UFO realm.
We can go all over the place. I always just bounce around, so there's no format.
So I was like the opposite of you. I was that kid and adult that was very into the ghost stories and unsolved mysteries. When I was watching that, it's like, oh yeah, the ghost story. Oh, now Robert Stack's talking about UFO. Turn that off. I had no interest in the UFO thing. And then I will always say this, that Hollywood ruined my interest in early UFOs because of movies like Fire in the Sky, which was the Travis Walton story,
right?
Which I know is, anybody that's done their UFO research will tell you, is horribly inaccurate. They exaggerated, because it's Hollywood. And then movies like Independence Day, like where just the aliens are coming down and they're destroying everything. Like, I don't like these things. I don't want to learn about them. I don't want to meet them. But then you have your own UFO experience. And then things change. So in 2000, I think it was 2007 or 8, somewhere around there, or 9, somewhere around those years. And I was out in Michigan, and we were in a little area called Ferrisburg, and it butts up to the Grand River in Lake Michigan. And it was November, and I had stepped outside, and my buddy Tom was having a cigar outside on his patio, and it was evening. I don't know, 9:30, 10 at night. It was dark already. And I happened to be looking out in the sky, and all of a sudden I saw something move that did not seem natural. And this was like my total nightmare because of, again, like I just said, being fed this steady diet of horrible UFO Hollywood movies where everything's coming to kill you and eat you and dissect you and do horrible things to you. This was not something I was asking for. So I watched this thing for a couple seconds do impossible maneuvers in the sky, zip from just left to right. And finally I said to Tom, look up. What is that? What do you see that? And he looks up and he sees it, and he watches it, and it's still doing impossible maneuvers. And he's like, that's not an airplane. And I'm like, oh no, just like, what's going on? Oh no, it's going to come beam me up. This is it. This is my Travis Walton experience. Great. See you guys. And so, Scott from Ghostly Talk my guy. He was on the couch at the time. I always joke. He was actually watching Police Academy. I remember this vividly. And so we jumped in the house and we said, get out here right now and look up in the sky. So he jumps out and he looks up in the sky. It's still doing in maneuvers that we can't explain. And he looks up. So Tom runs into the house. He grabs a camera. From this point on, I had a new appreciation for anybody with their stupid blurry UFO photos and their horrible shaky video cams and everything, because you can't get anything good. It's nighttime photography. It's impossible. So Tom has his camera and his tripod set up. He's trying to capture this thing. The one good thing about the video footage is you can hear us talking about what we're seeing. So you hear us saying, oh my God, it just did this. Oh my God, we saw the colors. We saw lights on the craft, green, red, and white. And it finally, after we watched this thing for about 10 minutes, and it would blink every once in a while, it would blink out of existence and blink back in, do these crazy maneuvers, move so fast that we couldn't explain it, and then finally gone. So in our video footage, you hear us talking about it. I know in previous Ghostly Talk episodes, we've talked about this. I can't remember exactly which episodes, but we had we ran out to the Grand River. There was a hotel on the water that we could go look out just in the open sky, and we just sat there for like 2 hours looking up, like, come back. Where'd you go? Nothing ever came back. To this day, I kind of feel like we might have been looking at something government related. I can't tell you that was something, from another planet, or being driven by alien life form. I feel like that could have been something weird and experimental that we were witnessing, that they were testing out over the water. There's been a lot of course, Lake Michigan, Great Lakes in general have been a known hotbed for UFO sightings of all kinds. And then was it 2009? No, way later than that. What am I thinking? It was it was only like 3 years ago.
It was about 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago,
Yeah.
when you and I were out there
Yeah.
in the same spot.
Same similar spot
Same
over
area.
where the Grand River meets Lake Michigan. Marnie and I were outside. It was May. And I do remember specifically the day because it was after prom for the high school students. And after prom in Grand Haven, they would allow the students to go out and do all these things till like 5 a.m. One of them was mini golf.
Well, the whole town, Grand Haven, is a very small town, but attracts a lot of people from Chicago and all over, especially during that time because it was Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
It was prom night. And I think it was May.
It was a nice night too. It was nice weather. And we were sitting out there, and there was a little mini putt-putt course by us, and there's a certain spot that Marnie and I always like just congregate and hang out by. And all of a sudden, I don't know, it's like 11:30 at night, kind of late,
it was close to midnight.
Yep. We looked up and we saw something that at first I know we thought it was a drone. We thought like a drone was flying over the putt-putt course taking pictures of the students because that would make sense.
There was a whole dialogue that was existing. So Amber and I, we talk about weird stuff all the time. So she's my buddy I could do that with. So we were out there that night. Amber and I could talk for hours about anything. Could be strawberry. And,
right.
And we'd find something interesting for 3 hours.
And we've done that on the Ghostly Talk show, all of us, actually.
Right.
And we've done that in person too, Steve.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
But we had a great time at that UFO conference a couple of years ago.
Did.
Yeah. But go ahead. I interrupted.
Oh, that's okay. So that night, though, Amber and I, our conversations jump from all over different topics the whole time. And we never skip a beat. We don't even take a breath. But that night, we were talking Stephen Greer, Tom DeLonge, and Grant Cameron.
We were totally talking everything UFO.
And this conversation got so, it was like this really in-depth, you could feel the energy from it. We were just, bouncing all these ideas. And I stepped outside of this pavilion, and we both kind of stepped sideways. And I looked up and I said, check out this drone. But at the moment I said it, I thought that's not a drone. And she stepped over and we both, I think our jaws both hit the ground. And I don't even know what happened. It was like this weird time warp and there was slight dialogue. Our eyes never left the sky.
No.
And what we were looking at, actually, it initially looked like a drone. And it came closer.
Yeah.
At a very slow rate.
Yeah.
And then as it came closer, it got bigger. I could not. Later when we filed the MUFON report, there's no way I could determine the height, the
No,
size. It
no.
was so bizarre.
It was hard to tell.
But Steve, this thing was, it was the best word we could come up
Organic.
with was organic. It had an energy field around it. That's
Reddit,
the way to
yeah, and
describe
it kind of glowed reddish, like
kind
reddish.
of, on the inside of
Yeah.
whatever that was. And then it had whatever was around it, like an energy, I don't know what to describe it as other than an energy field.
Yeah.
Pulsated in and out. So it looked like
Yeah,
whatever
like
it was moved.
Yeah, growing kind of a little bit.
And then
it got
shrinking.
bigger as it came closer to us.
Right. But there was something inside of that.
Yeah.
So you couldn't quite determine shape or anything like that. But it came forward, and we happen to be talking, UFOs. So this comes in, it sits.
Yeah,
And it
hovers.
sits just hovering, and it's huge. And then it goes up.
Yep.
And
Takes
like
off.
all of a sudden it was a star.
Gone.
It was the most bizarre.
So this is far more spectacular than that first experience you had, Amber.
Yes.
Amberrose.
We had a longer experience with the first encounter, but the way that first encounter moved, I really feel we were looking at something super stealth technology, like something weird going on that the government, was experimenting.
It could
well be.
It
could have been otherworldly. I don't know. But this thing, there's no way this was some kind of government driven, like there's a little human dude in this, like flying this thing. And I know there's been I've come across since then, as we've looked up trying to explain what we saw. There are some researchers out there that have, and I know Zelia Edgar. I had this conversation with Zelia, that talking about these organic entities in the sky, living in the sky, and
Yes.
That's a whole other bizarre topic. Like that, there's this whole ocean of potentially organic organisms in the sky. But I don't know what this was. I don't know.
I feel like with, and I don't want to get weird. I get skeptical with myself when I talk about energy and my ability to read it and know things. But that night with the conversation taking place, and if you could have seen the scene around us, where you have a putt-putt golf course down below this hill that Amber and I are standing on, and all these kids out there.
None of them looked
and then
up.
Amber and I are the only ones.
We're the only ones
and
noticing.
The conversation that we were having was so powerful at the moment. It really was, energy-wise. It was very powerful. And prior to that night, I was telling Amber, I told her this a couple times, coming in that night, I did a lot of, I'm always talking to, forgive me, the universe and whatever energies out there. And I almost was pleading with, come on, you know what? I've had these experiences, this experience. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. You got to show me.
Give me a sign.
You got to show me.
Yeah.
You got to show me, or else I don't know what to believe. And so that was occurring like in my conversation on the way that night. So, and that brings up a whole ton of different topics. But Amber and I were in the heated discussion that we were having, and just really feeling it. And at that moment, the only two people in the world that we felt were acknowledging, with all these other people in Grand Haven outside that night, Amber and I were the only ones standing there staring up. And we watched something so incredibly weird.
Yeah.
And then that night, I have to drive North Muskegon, which is another, how many miles? 20 miles?
A 25-minute drive or so.
It's about 20 minutes. Into my house, and I left there, and it didn't end there. I was traveling back in this huge, I'm almost weirded out. It just feels weird to even talk about it, but this huge ball of red light, like, beamed past, and it was like following me home. And then it was gone. It was like a shooting star, but very low and very red and big. But the whole night was just weird. And after that, she and I talk about it every now and then. And both of us, we just said this recently, like, that should have changed. It's weird, and it's almost sad that you have to go about everyday life after experiencing something so incredibly odd and not normal. And it should change your entire perspective on the world, and you'll on fire to dig for what reality is. It is so freaking complicated, but it didn't, like we went about life.
Yeah,
after
you had
that.
to
It was strange.
just accept it and of course regurgitate it in some way and try to think about what you saw. And of course, I know we both looked up things and that's how I came across other people talking about seeing and witnessing organic type things in the sky that were similar to what we saw. But it's not as common as like someone seeing like a nuts and bolts craft or saying,
Right.
we saw this orb or we saw this oval shaped or saucer shaped thing.
I gotta say, there was for it to happen the way it did, Steve. I felt deeply that there was a consciousness involved in what we were seeing. It showed up at that time when it did. Only Amber and I were experiencing.
No one, none of those kids looked up,
and it was very, very real.
Well, that's also kind of common where a group of people will be there, but only certain people are focused or even can see if they're looking in the same spot in the sky.
Yeah.
The object. But let me just backtrack a little bit. You mentioned a lady named Zelia Edgar earlier, and for those that those that listen to my show regularly know that she's been on several times as a guest and often as a co-host, and she's been on Ghostly Talk. A great lady who's got all doing very well. She's I can't tell you about all the things she's doing because some of them are under double secret probation. But she's a young lady. We met at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. And she and I hit it off because we're both students of John Keel and Jacques Vallée, and turned out we both loved Twin Peaks. So we just did a show on that recently. But she has pursued the UFOs as living organisms as well, and I've done a lot of research into that. There's a gentleman named, just very briefly, and I'll let you give it back to you, Marnie, a gentleman named Trevor James Constable, who's no longer with us, but years ago he wrote a book called They Live in the Sky, where he was taking photographs, allegedly, with infrared film, and you would get these like sky amoebas and so forth. Now, there's another guy, Paul Devereaux. I think he might have been on Ghostly Talk years ago, the original run. And he's a guy known for writing all kinds of books on Earth energies and Earth lights, that kind of thing. Well, he wrote one of his sections in one of his books on Earth lights. He talks about proto-entities, and he talks about situations where the being or whatever seems to be linked to the craft or the orb or whatever it is. They're inseparable, like it's all part of a living organism. I could go a lot more into that. But so, yeah, there's something, there's not one answer to this, and when we talk about objects that may not be government operated, but there's something else. They may not be from another galaxy. They may be from some other a realm or dimension or something like that as well. We just don't know. But I think, Marnie, I don't know if you were finished with your thought.
Well, just to come, to kind of go back to what you were saying about another realm, I think one of the key things that I felt, and words that I used was just that, boy, I'm losing my train of thought. I got all excited for a moment. I'm so sorry.
No, that was probably my fault.
It is conscious.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm coming back to consciousness, but the biggest thing that I felt that night, and it's really such a complicated thing because I'm not, I love science, and I went to a university with scientists of a different realm, psychology, but physics and quantum physics and all that stuff. There's so much research going on. I can't even comprehend it. I want to. I have an interest in it, but when you come to consciousness, that's all I can say is because I'm an intuitive and I feel energy and I experience energy. To me, when I talk about that, it sounds so happy, but I really, that night, the most powerful thing to me was when it showed up.
Yeah.
And that it seemed
like
hey, it was directly like, hey,
you guys were talking about me. What's up?
I heard you. I heard what you asked for earlier.
Yeah,
I
it's
heard
weird.
Your conversation.
It's weird.
Yes, we're here. Hello, now we're gone. Whatever it is. I don't know what we are.
And we had this final moment where I know we were staring off into space. I mean, it was a clear night, so you could see stars and in that area of West Michigan, you can see more stars than you would, like, let's say in Metro Detroit or something. And I know I didn't say anything, and you didn't say anything right away. And I remember at some point we started saying, okay, did you see it eject 3 different things?
Yeah. Did you see what I just saw?
Yeah.
And then I think we started questioning each other.
Yeah, we started wondering because we're both staring kind of silently in the sky. We're talking about just whatever.
Steve, this was 45 minutes of staring.
Staring
silence.
hard. And so then there was a moment, though, when we were watching, we were so hard trying to watch that speck, that thing that was this red, weird, biological-looking, organic amoeba in the sky, zip off at impossible speeds, and then to kind of try to, with your human eye, watch that pinpoint in the sky, if that was even the pinpoint. And both of us came to the conclusion that we did see something that seemed to eject 3 balls of light, or I don't know, 3 star. I don't know what it was.
3 things,
which is boom, boom,
that
boom,
were lights ejected
from
out of
this thing,
this speck in the sky. And it did it 2 to 3 times. I'd have to, at that time we were able to clearly report details, but it was 3 things, 3 lights ejected from this thing at very fast speeds.
Very fast.
It was very distinct.
And the fact that we both kind of saw that and we didn't comment on it, I like that. I mean, I even with my friends, I want to be objective as possible. So the fact that we both kind of came to the conclusion that, yes, did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Did you see that? Yeah, I saw that.
If Amber says to me, if Amber of all people says to me, yes, I saw 3 things, then I go, okay, I'm not nuts.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Amber, of the 2 of us, is probably going to pick apart things a little heavier. We just have different experiences. And she is a researcher, that's what she does. And me, I'm just an experiencer. So sometimes I like to double check what I experience with somebody else if they happen to be there. I mean, most often it doesn't happen that way. So it was, to me, a major blessing to have Amber witness exactly the same detail
it's nice to have that happen. It's always in any situation, whether it's like a ghost world thing, like, hey, did you see that door close? I saw that door close. Okay, great. We're not crazy.
No kidding. Even my dentist, I was, he you know how your dentist asks you, they must take notes and say, oh, this is so and so, he's into the weird stuff. So, well, what are you doing this summer? Well, I'm speaking here and there, and he says, did I ever tell you about my UFO sighting, up north?
Oh my God!
And so everybody, everybody, we've had this. I mean, people, it gets ridiculed. The local news always has a little funny thing at the end where they poke fun at something. But everybody, you're sitting there, you're playing cards at somebody's house. They start talking about the ghost that ripped down the blanket between the rooms because they were sandblasting the walls or whatever. But he said, he saw this light, and all of a sudden it just zips across the sky and stops. His jaw dropped, and fortunately one of his buddies was there, saw the same thing, and he said, I was so glad that somebody else saw exactly what I did.
Yeah. That's funny you say dentist, because every time I went to my dentist, my old one, he was super sweet, super cool, my dentist. He actually bought a copy of my first book for everyone in his office. How cool is that?
Oh, is that ever cool?
I was like, you could have just given me a free cleaning. I would have been really cool with that. But like, that's cool too. Like, I'll bring in like 11 copies of my book for you. That's cool. But then that meant my dental hygienist, Pat, constantly talked to me about ghosts and true crime while she's picking at my teeth, which is not my favorite thing in the world. And then she'd be like, ask me questions while she's working. So she'd have to literally pull away the dental, stuff and be like, so what do you think about that? And I'd be like, well, okay, pull that thing that's always sucking the spit out of your mouth. She's
not
pulling that out of my
conducive to
mouth.
conversation. Right?
And I'm, okay, let me tell you this story quick. And then she put it back in the mouth and then go back to telling me her stories. It's fun. It's fun when you do this kind of stuff, when you talk about weird stuff. You kind of engage other people. You allow them. I think when you come out and you're comfortable with what you're talking about, with weird things, paranormal things, supernatural, whatever you want to call it, you allow other people to be comfortable in your space to tell their weird experiences and start sharing them, and not feel like such an oddball out, that they can be like part of the crew. They're not the weirdo. And even though weirdo is our friend who's John Tenney, who everyone loves, and probably maybe people that listen to this show have been heard a John Tenney lecture or have heard a podcast with him. He will tell you the origin of the word weirdo is not bad. Right. And it's in, like Marty said earlier, you said the word tribe. It's our tribe. So it's really nice to give people that platform, whether it's in the dental chair at the hygienist and they feel comfortable telling their story and spilling their beans, or whether it's in the supermarket or somewhere else. It's great to give people these platforms to speak, if it's on a podcast, whatever. I will say, though, because of our UFO experiences, because of my 2008 and then the later one, it got me interested finally in UFOs. So I started diving into the UFO world. Oh my God, what a mess, Steve! What a mess.
Let me ask you, just generally, what are some of the original books you read when you started to get interested in UFOs?
Oh, Steve, I can't even. We're well, okay. I mean, early on, of course, I kind of, because of podcasts and you and other people, I got into Keel, I got into Jacques Vallée, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I feel like I kind of stepped in with the best foot forward into this, but it is, what a convoluted mess.
I think
it is so hard, and I feel good. I feel good about this because just the other day, I was listening to Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan had Knapp on, George Knapp.
Okay.
And Knapp was on there talking about Skinwalker Ranch and all the things he's dealt with Bob Lazar and everything, and he had Jeremy Corbell on. And
just a second, just to remind a few people that don't know who George Knapp is. He's a reporter, investigative reporter out of Las Vegas. He co-hosts on Coast to Coast AM sometimes. He co-wrote The Hunt for the Skinwalker with Colin Kelleher, a scientist, but part of the team that Bigelow set up. And of course, the Skinwalker Ranch is one of those high strangeness areas out in Utah where all kinds of weird stuff happens. But anyway, go ahead with what you were going to say about George Knapp.
And I was going to say, I felt so comforted after what George was talking about, everything going on, Rogan's, questioning about Skinwalker and Lazar and everything. And Knapp says, after 30 some years researching and documenting and reporting on this, I have pretty much earned myself a PhD in ufology. But I am still just as confused today as I was from day one. And I was like, oh, thank you, George. Because I've only been maybe actively researching UFO cases and things for maybe all of 5 years. It's not that long in the grand scheme of things. And trying to just sort of digest any book I can, anything that makes sense, even the weird stuff. Even the weirdos out there that people have issues with, like George Van Tassel or other people in the history. I've been trying to just take everything as I can and interpret, just learn about it.
And again, let me just reiterate that George Van Tassel was one of the original contactees back in the 50s. He lived under Giant Rock. It was a giant rock out in California. There were like rooms underneath. He would do one of the early channelers, and I mentioned Trevor James Constable before, who photographed supposedly sky creatures. Trevor James Constable learned how to channel from Van Tassel. Now, later on, Trevor James Constable began to believe that the channeling was coming from a source that was not legitimate, and he discontinued that while he studied other things. But, so you're right. When you mentioned Van Tassel and a lot of the so-called contactees, different from what we talk about as abductees, that can be the real fringe. But see, what I have done is now John Keel himself said that he doubted that a lot of these things were extraterrestrial. He thought something else was going on. But also when people said, what was the Mothman? I mean, here's the guy that wrote the Mothman Prophecies, spent months down there at a time researching this, and he said he doesn't know. He did not know what it was. The Mothman was a series of contradictions, really, like you're talking about. You get into this, and it's a mess because it doesn't seem to make sense. So what I do is, and see what you think about this, the book that I'm co-writing with Joey Medea is called Parallels and Patterns, a new paradigm for the study of paranormal phenomena. You do find, at least I think, especially when you look at Jacques Vallée and folklore and so forth, I have found parallels between a lot of these different things. It doesn't necessarily give us answers, but have you found that in any of your research where you're studying the research of one person or certain cases or whatever, and do you start to see some things emerge that are similar, even though it might not give you an ultimate answer? You know what I mean?
I think in the ghost world, there's so often the ghost people and the UFO people have separated themselves, and they've stayed just, 6 feet apart. And I think from researching both the ghosts and the UFO you start to see correlations between things. If there's a haunting somewhere and it has people are seeing orbs or lights in the sky or the missing time, and then they're just kind of equating that to a ghost story. Well, no, enter the UFO researcher, and they start looking at that as a whole different perspective. There's some haunted roads in Michigan. Denton Road is one of them, where people have experienced strange things. I know a lot of MSU students have done back in like the early 60s and stuff like that, have done for the fraternities, would do dares and stuff out there and take their potential fraternity.
Where is Denton Road?
I think it's outside of because if it's MSU, it's got to be outside of Lansing.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm going to blank. I'm going to blank exactly on the spot.
South Central Michigan, we'll say.
Yeah, and so anyway, but one of the popular things about Denton Road was people would be driving and all of a sudden experience like a strange blue light in the sky following them. And if your knowledge is only like, hey, if I see something strange and glowing in the sky, it's a ghost. Well, then you're going to say ghost. But then enter the UFO knowledge, and then maybe something else is going on here. There's a lot of those cross correlations that I think when you don't, as a researcher, you have to enter every field. You have to go into the ghost field. You have to go into the UFO realm. You have to go into the cryptid realm and kind of connect the dots, because often they connect in crazy ways that it will boggle your mind.
Oh, that's right. You've read Keel's Trojan Horse, right?
Oh, yeah. I've read Trojan
I remember we were talking about that.
Yeah.
And that was the book that messed me up. I was the happy guy with the aliens landing and, checking things out, soil samples and everything, jump back in their craft and get out of there. And then Keel came along with UFO's Operation Trojan Horse, where he pulled poltergeist phenomena, abductions, cryptids. Even I talked to James Bobo Fay of Finding Bigfoot at a conference, and he's seen orb phenomena with the naked eye in places where Bigfoot is supposed to roam. Ron Moorhead, who got captured the Sierra Sounds out in the Sierra Nevadas, those great sounds of allegedly Bigfoot, he would have batteries drain out there. Cameras wouldn't work, recorders wouldn't work, in the same way that I'm sure you have experience with ghost investigation, where people experience with UFOs and so forth. So there are those, and even the Loch Ness Monster, when you get into that, the happy-go-lucky plesiosaur idea seems to evaporate because there's so much high strangeness that is connected with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I know it's fun to dissect these stories and legends and to make these connections. And sometimes you just dissect them, and as you break them down, you sometimes find also still very human reasons why the stories are told. Like there's a story about the Melonheads that I is one of my all-time favorite legends.
I'm so glad that's in my notes. Believe it or not, I have notes here, and as you're talking about Melonheads, I just want to tell you that I thought that was fairly exclusive to Ohio, but apparently not.
Oh, no. I feel it really started in West Michigan, and then I always joke that they have cousins in Ohio and cousins in Connecticut. So like there's so many legends around there in maybe haunted places, haunted roads, haunted cemeteries, where you have traditional, like, I don't want to say stereotype, but it kind of is, but like the ladies in white, or certain things that just, the ghostly hitchhiker, there certain things that just kind of cross boundaries wherever you go. And the Melonheads is a story out of Saugatuck, Michigan, along Lake Michigan. And the basic general story is that there was a doctor who was working on children who were hydrocephalic. So they had water on their heads. They had these giant melon heads. And then one day his funding ran out and he just had to let the kids go. I mean, where were their parents? Why didn't their parents come get them? Why did they just let the kids go? And the kids go, they run free and they stay feral. And they run at cheetah-like speeds, and they'll attack your car, and they hide in the woods. The whole thing is just hilarious. It's so goofy, and people throughout the 60s and 70s in that area would say like, "Oh my God, we saw the Melonheads. We experienced it. One chased my car." There was all these crazy things. So I often think when you hear this story kind of popping up in Ohio, Northern Ohio, it was a similar story. Although he was named, the doctor was Dr. Crow. And Dr. Crow worked on hydrocephalic children and blah, 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 blah. It was very similar. And then maybe someone lived in West Michigan, moved to Northern Ohio, shared that story, told it with their teenage friends, whoever. Story starts. Then maybe someone else goes to Northern Connecticut or wherever. That wasn't the part in Connecticut. And they share it. And somehow it starts. But really, this story only pops up in those three places. So that's kind of unique to other stories, like I said, with the ladies in white or ghostly hitchhikers, whoever. And so
maybe we've established that the Buckeyes actually stole that story from Michigan, huh?
Maybe,
Plagiarists.
yeah.
Plagiarists, but go ahead.
Plagiarists. So here's where it gets interesting. When you do the research and you look into the history of things and you try to explain things, my buddy Tom, back in the 60s, was part of the AV Club. So they had a battery-powered reel-to-reel that they had scary sounds on. Now, they would go to the Saugatuck State Park area where these melon heads roamed, and they would go to the state park area. They would hide in the woods, and they would wait for a car to pull up in this area because the cars pulled up to do what? They made out. There was teenagers making out in the car. So they would pull up in their car. They would wait for the windows to get steamed up, and then they'd hit play on that battery-powered reel-to-reel, and then the scary sounds would come out of the woods, start freaking out the people making out in the car. And then Tom, as I always joked with him, his band of merry melonheads would come running out of the woods, bang on the car, and the car would just, go into reverse and just take out, just drive out of there, spitting pavement up behind it. So I always joke that the people to this day may say, well, me and your mom were making out in the state park and the melonheads came out of the woods. Well, no, it was Tom and his band of merry melonheads. So years later, too, Tom had daughters, and he would use, like, the melonheads as leverage. Oh, you guys want to go to bed? Oh, the melonheads are coming to put you to sleep. And these kids would be terrified, because it's a local legend. Well, anyway, years later, a fellow researcher in my area also was kind of looking into this legend. And when I was looking in the history of the area, I did find in the 1920s there was a group in Saugatuck that was working on. They were it wasn't a doctor place, but it was a place that was helping children with disabilities. And I thought, well, okay, back in the 20s, maybe there were children who were hydrocephalic, who had some kind of disability, and kids will be kids and adults will be mean and whoever, and maybe they called them melonheads, maybe they called them little monsters, whatever. So I thought maybe that's one possibility where these things came from, but I think this makes much more sense. And this, of course, I learned this after my book was published. But this other fellow researcher happened to have someone contact him who went to a private school in the area of where the melon had supposedly, lived and roamed. And the public school kids called those private school kids melon heads because they were way more smarter than the public school kids. And this was in the 60s. So now you start to see the origin of maybe where the melonhead's name came from, and that maybe it wasn't from a rogue band of hydrocephalic children let go by a doctor in a hospital that isn't known to exist. But you start to see how these legends grow and change and morph. And to me, that's just as fun to watch how the human mind and storytelling and oral storytelling works as sometimes just the supernatural itself. So I like when you can kind of sort of be Sherlock Holmes and figure this stuff out a little bit through research, and that it's not always supernatural, but it's interesting nonetheless to learn how this happens and plays out.
And people that want to read about the melonheads can go to your book, Ghosts and Legends of Michigan's West Coast, which, and by the way, I have to mention something. While I have all kinds of books here, and some of my favorite books are books that are stapled or spiral bound or Xeroxed or whatever. Whoever your publisher is, your books are beautifully done, beautifully put together.
Oh, they do a good job. That's the History Press. They do a good job. They got bought out by Arcadia Press. Arcadia Press, a lot of people out there might recognize because it doesn't matter what state you live in the United States. You might see like an Images of America series where you go into your local grocer or a drugstore and see like something about your local area where they have old vintage postcards or photos. And that's Arcadia Press. And they bought out History Press, and History Press was exclusively their point was to get people that are from their area to write about their area. And so that it's a lot of fun. And I like that. I like writing about what I know. I'm not familiar with Florida or California or anything else. So it's like that's where I'm from. I'm from Michigan. So
Well, that's great. I'm sure these are strategically placed in areas where tourists go and people want to learn about the local legends and so forth. They're just very well put together. But also, I have to mention, I know you've been told this before, Amberrose Hammond. That's your real name, right?
it is my real
I mean,
name.
it's the perfect name. It wasn't like you had a manager that said, "Hey, Grinelda, we're going to change your name. We got to have a pen name here." So it's almost like what was the name of the character in Dark Shadows? Victoria Winter?
Something like that.
Yeah,
I
something
don't.
like that. See,
I
it's almost like I mean, I could imagine a scenario where Victoria Winter gets crushed by a gargoyle, and her long lost cousin gets replaced. Amberrose Hammond tries to solve her murder. I mean,
right.
it's the perfect name for this sort of
I've been
thing.
told that my name has like a Victorian creepy feel to it, and trust me, growing up, it was not an easy name to have. It took me till like second grade, I swear, to spell my name, and then my name
Did you go by
legally,
Amber Rose or by Amber usually?
it depends. Legally, my name is actually hyphenated, but I got sick of so many people just calling me Amber or calling me or thinking Rose was my middle name or and some
Yeah.
instances even thinking Rose was my last name. It's just weird. So at some point in my youth, like in probably junior high, I just started mushing the name together and I put two R's together, which is kind of like I'm breaking, English language laws. And then people would start to get real creative with the spelling. Like I've had Ambrose, Ambrosia, Ambrose. I've had a lot of creative spelling of my names. I've had a lot of people that have emailed me initially, and and then they met me because I showed up for like a newspaper, like article or something, and they're like, "I thought you were a dude," because they thought my name was Ambrose, which is a dude's name. And I'm like, no, no, I'm a female. But it's been weird, but that's okay. I thank my mom for giving me a weird name, and I do think it stands out. So I do appreciate that now as as I age. But it's one of those things where I totally don't mind being called Amber. It's like Jen, Jennifer, Stace. I can't talk. But, just one of those things. So a lot of people do call me Amber. My grandma traumatized people. My friends would call me up on the phone back when you did that, rotary phones.
Yes.
And they say, "Is Amber there?" And my grandma would always say, "I don't know an Amber, but I know an Amber Rose." And then they'd have to say, "Well, is Amber Rose there?" And then my grandma would come get me. So that's my cute grandma story.
Grandmas will do that sort of thing. Do you do you read a lot of true crime?
I don't.
Okay.
That's why it's bizarre that I stumbled upon I actually wrote two true crime stories because I'm not a giant true crime. My favorite true crime book is probably Devil in the White City by Eric Larson because that thing was written like a fiction novel. It's beautifully written. And I'm waiting because Hulu is with, I think, Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. That's been in the works to put that book into a movie form. But no, I'm not a huge true crime junkie. So it's bizarre to me always that I look at my stuff I published and that two of my books are true crime. But I felt it was important to get that stuff out. And that's why we do Wicked Cemetery tours in West Michigan because a lot of times West Michigan is a slightly conservative area. I shouldn't even say slightly, it is conservative. And if you start doing ghost tours through things, sometimes people are a little they get a little annoyed that they think you're being disrespectful to the cemetery or to the dead because you're talking about ghosts or something supernatural. But oh God, talk about murder and crime and they don't have any issue. So the library I worked with in that town at the time, we kind of thought, why don't we dig up more true crime stories about the people buried in our historical cemetery and give a true crime tour? So for about 9 years now, we've done true crime stories. And of course, everyone, because we do it in the fall, when we get to a certain tombstone that is non-existent of Peter Koopman, I do give everyone a good ghost story. And I will say that if anyone looked disengaged or bored for whatever reason at the time of the tour, as soon as I announce they're going to get a ghost story, all eyes are on me. Everyone loves a ghost story, whether they admit it or not.
That's true.
So that's how we kind of sneak a couple ghosts into the tour.
My friend Brandy has is a I think a true crime junkie. For her relaxation for summer reading is to read about horrific murders. I think I can't explain it, but anyway, James Renner is somebody I saw speak at the last year's Creature Weekend, and he's mostly known as a true crime guy. But he also wrote. He came from Ohio, and he writes this great chapter in there where he investigated the Ohio Frogman. Was it Loveland Frogman?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was pretty interesting. The ones I have gotten into the John Norman Collins, the co-ed killer, from right around the time of the moon landing, 1969 or so. He was caught, and there's a couple. There's the Michigan murders and what is it? Something about Ypsilanti, but those, and I think. I might have read one or two other ones, but so that's about it for me. But I find that stuff pretty creepy. But it is interesting that you just write some true crime. You don't really get into reading much of it.
Yeah, I'm not obsessed with it, but I found myself when I wrote my Wicked Grand Rapids book, I ended up writing this whole chapter and becoming obsessed with prostitution. That was the last thing I ever thought I would be writing about was prostitutes. But it was fascinating going back in time and looking at this prostitution from the 1870s and looking at these women who could not get into any other job, and the madams that got involved that actually were trying to, this particular one that I researched, Georgie Young, she kind of started to try to protect women in a weird way by bringing them into her house. She also was like an early business lady. I mean, where women couldn't own property, she owned property, and she made at the time the equivalent of $14,000 a week off of her house. And she, the old papers, the old newspapers are so full of dark secrets. They spill so much in those old newspapers that they wouldn't do even nowadays. And one of the papers I remember quoted saying that the prostitutes of Grand Rapids, Michigan know more about the dark world and crime world of Grand Rapids than their own police. And because they would know all the secrets going on, because all these high ups and uppity guys and rich guys of Grand Rapids would go to the houses of prostitution and they would spend their money and drink there. And those girls knew stuff. And it was very fascinating learning about that and how these women tried to empower themselves through that kind of horrible dark period that some of them would find themselves in. So that was a really interesting thing that I found myself writing about that I never in a million years would have predicted, from ghosts to UFOs to prostitution. But it was still fascinating.
What are your best sellers? Is it the ghost book or the true crime?
It's a ghost book. It's a ghost book.
All right.
And then my publisher also is just decided to come out with a youth version of some of their Haunted America series. So they chose 13 books from their entire Haunted America series, and my ghosts and ghost book from West Michigan. Oh my God, why can't I say my own title? Anyway,
that's really cool.
They decided to take that one and turn it into a book for middle school kids. And so another woman took my material, rewrote it for that level, and then of course on the bottom of the book it says based on, the book Ghosts and Legends of Michigan's West Coast by Amberrose Hammond. And so it will be exciting to get a copy of that book in my hand and to see how she kind of turns some of my stories into at a level for kids that age to read.
Right.
So that's kind of exciting. It's like
they don't run screaming off into the night.
Yeah, exactly. And probably didn't take some of my more gory stuff, or like maybe they probably ignored some of the true crime, but it will be cool to see that. And it's also like I didn't write that book, but it's like I have another book that I can, sell when I go to lectures or anything that was just kind of there. So it was kind of a nice honor to have them do that and take only 13 books and be part of that. So I'm happy to be part of that test run.
Do you still go on ghost investigations?
I haven't in a long time. I've stayed in the realm of just investigating, my own things, my own research, topics, okay. History, newspaper stuff.
Do you miss it?
Yes and no. It's fun to go to a notorious haunted place. I know like Marnie and I have been on some stuff where we've gone to conferences. Like I know namely up in Petoskey, we've done some stuff where we've gone up to Little Traverse Bay Paracon. And when we go into this little gorgeous Victorian community, of all these old Victorian homes that are in there. What, I can't remember the name of it.
I don't remember the name of it, but
I'm blanking on that.
Does it start with a P?
No,
There's one. Okay, there was one up that way that has all these homes.
but it's been there a while,
beautiful
since
stuff.
the 1800s.
Yeah, a lot of people are there.
Yeah.
And I think that the difference, I don't want to speak for you, Amber, but the difference for me is number one, I've never gotten into, like, maybe when the first ghost shows came out,
Yeah.
you were excited, I was excited that, oh, somebody's going to talk about something weird
Right.
on TV. But I became pretty skeptical of the shows, and sorry to, the people out there doing it, but I got turned off by that stuff, and part of it is, just my own real experiences, and so I
Yeah.
had a hard time watching this because I felt it was hokey and
Yeah.
whatever. But anyway, when we go to the things like that, I think it's really cool. It gives people an outlet who to experience things. But I feel kind of bad that I feel
Jaded.
well, thank you. I do. I feel like when we sit there and when we go, we went
Yeah.
as a group once. You and I generally distance ourselves
Yeah.
from the entire group. But there's too many people, and for me, it takes out the seriousness of certain things.
Yeah.
And there's too many energies involved if you're an energy person. And so to me, it takes away from the credibility. I am so walking on eggshells here, but
you're not, though, because it's hard. Like when you go, like, what we're talking about is going to a conference that at the end of the lecture series, they'll invite you into a haunted place. Like within this Victorian village, there's a couple of these like 3-story structures that back in the day, it was a Chautauqua. Chautauquas were these places in the 1800s where you would go and you would live and you would camp out for a couple weeks. It was like adult summer camp.
yeah,
Adult summer camp.
Summer church camp.
And there was a religious aspect, but then you could learn music, or you could go to a lecture, or you could listen to someone talk about Shakespeare.
It's very religious.
Yeah,
community.
and it still is to this day. And there's actually been some legal issues with that community, with the religious aspect of it. But anyway, it's a different story. So, and so we would go into these halls that we had access to, and it's hard on these group things. Like Marty said, it's like you have all these people involved and doing stuff and walking around, and people are so quick to want to believe and want to experience something
everything is an experience.
Yeah,
and I don't want to feel judgmental of that. I
no,
really don't, because
they could be experiencing something as soon as they walk in.
But you've got how many people were going through there, and so Amber and I, it's just I think because we've lived this for so long, and Amber's done what she's done, but this has been my whole life, and so it's, I don't know. I don't want to be judgy because I know that where I started, and I was there at that point at some point in my life, and and so it's a part of growth, with me as well. But I don't know. I don't do well in group settings like that. If I'm going to investigate something, it's more on a, what do I feel? What's my energy experience?
I'd like a smaller experience, I guess, than like the group stuff.
Like just me.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But a small group like that. And so when you get into those group tours, you get a mix of belief systems and excitability and stuff like that, and that can totally cloud the experience for me.
People wanting so desperately to have something happen that any sound they hear, is something.
Every feeling.
I remember Scott telling stories on the old Ghostly Talk about people doing that, and people say, I said, Scott, it's over there. Take a picture over there. Take a picture over there. And of course, there's nothing there. People so gung ho. What I want to ask both of you. You guys, I'm sure, have given some thought as to, some people have very definite ideas about the afterlife and what these things represent. We have sort of two categories of conscious hauntings and residual hauntings. Okay, just kind of general categories. And then we have you guys know about the Philip experiment, right? Where in Toronto they meditated on a fictional historical character, and it became as if real through the Ouija board and for the seance or however they did it. We know of tulpas. We know of the claims of the Slender Man, which supposedly came out of consciousness somehow. I mean, there's many examples. So what my question is this: if we accept the fact or the possibility of people leaving imprints sometimes, a residual haunting that is just sort of like a moving picture running over and over again, but doesn't seem to have any consciousness to it. Is it possible, based on some of these other things, is it possible that a residual haunting can become somewhat conscious or interactive with people? Whereas the individual, whoever they are, has moved on, their soul or essence has gone to wherever that goes to, but they've left this residual imprint that has become interactive somehow and acts like a conscious entity. Do you think that's possible?
I'm over here, Steve, just like waving my hand at Amber, and I'm getting all excited because I'm so glad you asked this question. I don't have an answer for you because I sat there in my quiet moments the other day, anticipating this conversation. I thought the exact same question, and the reason I
Really?
thought it, well, yeah, I did, and so this is like super exciting at the moment. But the reason I did, Steve, is because, as you know from me and our conversations, multiple experiences, crazy experiences, growing up in a Baptist church, not surrounded by anybody who talks about death, nobody with the same experiences as me, but a young child growing up all my years experiencing every single thing that we talk about in the realm of paranormal, including weird, use my French, shit, with, and that's saying it so nicely and delicately, with, now, I couldn't define it before, but would fit into the ufology world. I have so many different experiences, but some of them could be, I thought about residual. I mean, I've been out there doing not very many with residual, but I had poltergeist activity, and I had things that could be classified as residual, and I started to wonder the exact same thing. How does it all, because I was trying to link it all together. There has to be a link to every bit of it for one person to be able to experience every possible paranormal experience that people talk about. And you start to feel like an insane person, but then I started to wonder the same thing. What if the residual is brought about, with consciousness, can interact, but it's not? That is such a complicated question.
It is
that
so
you just
complicated.
Asked. That opened a whole different world.
Because I am learning more and more as I go down the rabbit holes of the paranormal that consciousness plays a larger and larger factor than anyone is even aware. And I am not some type of consciousness expert or PhD in any of this. So when you start, it's like similar to physics to me. You start going down that route, and it's very hard to sometimes grasp and to pick up on things. But a lot of researchers out there, when it comes to the idea of the residual haunting, is that somehow we can leave as humans, or any biological entity out there can somehow leave an imprint in the environment, that if at some point we have our tinfoil hat just tuned just right, that we can tap into it at some point, and then we experience that moment in time that maybe that person left an imprint of, and often it's something negative, like a car accident or a murder or something, which so often, that's why so many hauntings seem to have that negative intonation.
It's because emotional,
Yeah.
I don't,
You
Steve,
leave
I don't even know
something.
if we talked about this before. My prior history was in radio was personal development, and more on a consciousness level is really what it was, the heavy topic of it. And that emotional part of consciousness, or a human being, emotions can leave the biggest imprint.
Something's there.
It's huge. And so anything negative is always going to outweigh
the good,
positive.
which is sad.
It
is
sad.
I mean, look at our news sources out there. I mean, the negative stories outweigh the good.
Well,
it's just,
and it's strange. That gets into the whole psychology of it as well. But for some unknown reason, human beings are more attracted to to negative than they are
Yeah.
anything positive. And positive is so much more fleeting than the negative. But negative will hold on.
Yeah.
And it holds on at such a gut,
Yeah.
soul level and makes an imprint bigger than any positive
Yeah.
thing is ever going to make. And that is absolutely sad.
And
But-
then, so when people walking into these haunted situations where you have something negative happen, like a murder or something horrible, and then people, you know, or like these hospitals that people love to, or like Waverly Hills or any place like that.
But don't you wonder why they loved it? Like, I don't know, I'm going to get into something entirely different, but why doesn't somebody, and maybe because they don't find it, people are going to identify, Steve, with something that they can relate to on a perceptive level and emotional level. And it's intriguing to me that they find negative in those places. Now, when I go in there, I don't necessarily feel anything negative. What I'm going in and feeling something is something really intriguing.
Right.
Something maybe creepy, but it's creepy because I don't understand it.
Right.
And yet it's exciting to me. Now, so it's a matter of perception and how people perceive the world. But that emotional response is what is the most absolute powerful. And I can go on and on. So
Well,
anyway, I
yeah,
get excited.
and if people are going into these notoriously haunted locations and then they are somehow intuitively picking up on these motions, it's not even like we're picking up on a ghost. We're picking up on something, like we said, residual. So it's not even like, when it comes to the afterlife, I sometimes get more and more perplexed, and I hate to say this in a somewhat negative way, that sometimes I worry that dead is dead, and that our consciousness is what carries on. And people are picking up on that consciousness aspect, but dead is dead. You know, if that makes any sense. It's morose.
Body is dead.
Do you think that sometimes when they walk into these situations and they pick up the emotions, that they could actually sort of co-create the experience between the observer and the energy that's there?
Yeah.
Like a placebo. And
it's like the stuff is still there. It's like sticky, and you're somehow it's sticking onto you, and you're picking up to it. You know, it's like a receiver, like we're radios.
But you could go into the topic from that. I mean, boy, this is opening.
Yeah,
Steve, we can be on here forever.
Because it's like, are you picking up into something living still, like a consciousness that you can still perceive, or is it a consciousness that's just there because it's part of the environment and was left behind for some reason?
It would be tied to the same thing as how you manipulate the world. Okay, so every person has a perception. Every person has an experience from their history, whatever it is, their human history, that all ties into their energy level. And no matter what the experience is, it's or what the reality of that is, or the truth of it is, it's going to be the perception of the person. It's going to be the energy of the person that dictates or determines what the experience really is. Holy cow, I'm going to get excited, and we can go on for 3 more hours.
Right, easy.
Because now we're touching on something that I used to love to do. But
the thing is that if that does occur, somebody might think, well, that's disappointing. I just had this great conversation with this deceased family member, but maybe it's not really them. Maybe it's the residual that became into something that and fulfilled my expectations. But on the other hand, when you look at the negative side, when people seem to be getting voices from lonely and lost or frightened children, it would be comforting to think that perhaps that's not really them. It was a residual energy or whatever. Use the word energy. I don't know if that's the right word, of these children that are deceased, but they have gone on to their reward or something positive, but that whatever, that imprint is still there, reacting in a certain way that we think may be horrific. I mean, it would just be comforting to think that that's not actually their essence or soul, and that they have moved on.
You know, I Steve, I don't. The thing is that I don't. Nobody has this answer, right?
No.
So, you know, and for some people, maybe it seems comforting to one person, but be able to feel like somebody is consciously communicating to them from the other side is actually comforting. And I don't know, from my experiences, I would not be able to tell you that it was just my mind creating something, because I got to tell you, in one of my experiences with the man with the top hat, no face, and a long coat, I had an animal with me that night that reacted to it, who got locked in a cellar after that when it ran after it. I haven't been the only one in my world to experience what I experienced. So I can't say
Oh, it may
that
be. It may be. It still may be
Yeah,
something very, very real. Like in
there's
quotes,
still
like a tulpa
interactive.
can become real or whatever.
There's still
right.
an interactive
I
something going
Oh yeah,
on.
I think
right.
my don't want to discount anybody out
Yeah.
there having their experience that, because my experiences with somebody passed over has come in the form of a dream. And whether that's me, it was very real. The touch was very real. The hug was very real. The communication was very real. And the lasting energy from that. So I don't want to discount and not to say that we are doing that, but to somebody else, it might be perceived as us discounting what they're experiencing, and that's not at all true.
Oh no,
We're
no, no.
we're acknowledging that there's so many unanswered questions and there's so many possibilities to what it is that's being experienced. It's very, very real. I
Yeah.
know that, and to anybody listening that's going, but I'm telling you, I have had so many experiences. It's real, and but I just don't know what it
And
is.
it seems to be interactive. There is that interactive element to it because, like with Keel and anybody else, there's that trickster element.
Yes.
Like, is that trickster element messing with us? Like, what is its purpose? What is it doing?
And
And
to
then
me,
that just
to me, the
fades so
trickster
much.
element implies that there's an aspect of human consciousness involved.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. Yes.
But
And
but
it's
I think we can agree that there's more than one answer to ghostly phenomena, to cryptids, to UFOs, and so forth. To try and put
yeah.
it
We
all into
can't
one
sit in the
box
show
is
and
going
figure
to
it
be
out.
impossible.
we
Yeah.
have no idea. That's
No.
that's the point.
And
We
all we
just
can
don't
do
know.
is philosophize about it.
Yeah.
That's all we can do. We can sit here and there's great scientists out there making strides like Dean Radin and other people trying to
Uh,
dabble in human
I
consciousness
would love to talk to him.
and human superhuman powers and all that great stuff and there's plenty of people dabbling out there in the ghost world and trying to put their thoughts to theory
Grant Cameron and his consciousness.
oh, the Grant
research
Cameron is one of those great UFO researchers out there that I feel is going, into my opinion, a very good direction because he's exploring consciousness. Even Richard Dolan has started to explore the idea of consciousness and how much more it might impact ufology than we ever thought possible. Then it's just not a nuts and bolts reality. So I like that these people that are the heavy hitters, I feel like in ufology, are exploring this kind of stuff. And it's so, I've always said the more you stay in this field and the more you research and the more rabbit holes you go down, you will never get out of that rabbit hole. You will just go
So
deeper,
so
deeper.
so do you ladies see the paradox?
Yeah.
We've just said that we can't
Yep.
figure
No,
this crap out, this
no.
shit out. You know,
It
it gets worse and worse, yet
does.
we can't shake it. We can't,
Nope.
a couple times in past years, I've sort of thrown my hands up in ufology and said, this is crazy. People are infighting. There's no answers. And then you just get pulled back. You just can't turn your back on it.
Can't. You
Absolutely.
get addicted. I think if you're truly interested in this, you can't ever walk away.
Well, I feel like thing is it. I can't walk away, especially because we had an experience. And
Yeah, if you've had experiences too that you want explanations
I
for and can't find.
I had the vague experience of the missing time.
Yep.
I was 17 years old, but when you have something that's much more concrete, like you and I experienced, somebody else was there, somebody saw exactly the same thing. It's it, it, it that's yeah.
Yeah, you got to
Wow.
keep going. You can't
Lost
quit.
from words. Yeah,
You can't
you
quit.
can't.
Some people do. Some people do freak out and
No.
walk away. They go like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm not into this. This isn't my jam. I'm out.
Well, I'm not freaked out.
And it does it. It keeps me going.
It just says, all right, you saw
Yeah.
something, you experienced something. How do you
Keep looking.
keep looking? Absolutely.
And I blame ghostly talk.
There
That's
you
why
go.
we're here tonight, is because of ghostly talk, damn it. Well, listen, ladies, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. Andy's going to see how long this is, and he's going to
Yeah.
think, holy crap.
You guys, way too long.
This was
he-
really good.
But listen, we're going to have to do it again together and separately. I think Marnie. I think I'm going to contact Missy and see if she'll do a show. I think she would like to do another show, and
Maybe
and Amberrose. I think it'd be great to do a show primarily on the true crime aspect, and kind of focus on that.
And some gritty stories.
Oh, yeah, so I can. That's the kind of stuff that would keep me up at night. Yeah, even worse than moving coffins, man. I'll tell you.
Crime is real. It happened. It's proven. It's not. I don't have to debate anything. This dude murdered this person. This happened to this person. That's why I say there's more to fear from the living than the dead.
Well, Amber, tell us how to find Ghostly Talk. Tell us how to find all your books and to find out more about you.
Ghostly Talk can be found on any platform out there. We're on like iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud, anything, any app you use. Just Google Ghostly Talk. If you don't like to use apps, if you're a little old school, you can go directly to ghostlytalk.com and you can download any show. You can stream it from a show. You can download our billion years of archives from 2002 to 2009. If you want to check out Michigan's Other Side, if you're just interested in Michigan or you live in Michigan, yay, you can go to michigansotherside.com. I do have AmberroseHammond.com. It's just a source for people to contact me for lectures or anything, but there's not really a ton on that website. So, there's various sources that you can find me at. If you have a story to share, insights, if we do love to hear from people that listen to our podcast. We really appreciate it. If you like a certain show, if you give us a shout out or something, or send us an email, just go, I really liked episode 129. Cool.
And I'm going to ask them to check out an episode that I did with Tim Woolworth in the studios there. Tim, a great guy on ITC, which
Doug,
instrumental transcommunication. Okay.
Yeah. And our elusive co-host Doug appeared suddenly on that show.
That's right, Doug. Yeah, the infamous Doug. I thought he was a figment of Scott's imagination.
I know.
And Scott was just doing his voice all those years.
Yep. I know.
Doug's a fun night.
I know. Doug's not part of the show anymore. He's moved on. He's got other things. And so we've taken over another guest co-host and myself and stuff. So it was really cool that Doug just randomly showed up. Any old
it was an anniversary
out there that might have that show would be like, Doug's voice. It was. I think I forget what episode it was, but it was an anniversary.
Was it? How many years? Well, I don't know how many years. Who knows? It was an anniversary. That's the important thing.
It was some type of anniversary.
And go back and check in the High Strangeness Factor archives on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the show that Marnie and I did together. And is there, if people want to contact you, Marnie, about any experiences, are you up for that? Or can they contact you on Facebook?
They can absolutely contact me on Facebook. My page isn't wide open, but you can always contact me through Messenger. Find my page. Send me a private message. I will look for it.
Okay.
And
Marnie Kirby, right?
Marnie Kirby. Right.
Marnie Kirby.
Yeah. And you are somebody that has experienced the strange and unusual, and has done a lot to try and process it and put it in some kind of context. So
absolutely,
you'd be a good person to talk to for somebody that's had experiences that they can't quite fathom.
That is correct. I would love that.
Well, ladies, this has been an absolute blast. We will definitely have to do it again. I have really enjoyed having you guys on the show tonight.
Anytime.
Thank you, Steve.
Good. I will take you up on that when you said anytime. Okay. Consider that's a contract. Okay.
So, done.
Sit tight. I'm going to do my closeout, then we'll talk a little bit afterwards. Okay. And let's see. I did all my thank yous here. And I want to thank Scott, too, for getting us all set up and helping out on the technical end. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted by the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank our fearless leaders here at the network, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson. I also want to thank Andy Mercer in his capacity as producer for The Factor. And a thanks to Brian Zeller, who composed the great original music for the show. Brian also acts as my unofficial ombudsman, whether I need one or not. I can also be heard on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a correspondent on this same network, and many others. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Thanks for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.